Bob, you there?
Hey there.
Howdy.
How's it going, Kevin?
It's going really well.
Oh,
Going
that's
really
good.
well today. How about you?
Where do I begin? Can I take the whole podcast up and tell you about how miserable the day was?
You can mention the cat vomit if you want,
Yeah, my cat threw up and my feet hurt and I got sunburned and I'm cold, losing my
That's not
hair.
bad. Well, this would be an interesting podcast then.
Yeah, should have some callers call in and ask about my problems.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we might as well start with what you're drinking if you have all those kind of problems going on.
I opened up a new bottle tonight. It's
A new
Penelope
bottle.
Toasted Barrel Strength Bourbon.
Penelope, where's that from?
It is actually bottled here in Tennessee. I
Oh,
do think it's actually sourced from somewhere, possibly MGP, but I am not sure. Actually, it says it's distilled in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. So yeah, that's MGP.
well, there you go. How's it tasting?
It's good. A lot of maple on the nose and maple syrup on the palate is kind of what I've picked up so far.
Awesome.
How about you? What are you drinking today?
As I explained in the last cast, I'm going through the liquor cabinet with all the remnants, and this one, I don't know if it came from our store. I think it might have. It's some vendor might have left it quite a while ago. It's Duamante Verdinoce. Is a handcrafted in select small batches in Italy with a slowly steeped genuine Sicilian pistachio infusion.
I like that
Nat-
Italian accent there.
Natural craft ingredients and flavors and fine Italian artisan spirits. So it's an Italian liqueur that has a pistachio taste to it and Madagascar vanilla.
You
So
know, that sounds like it would be good if you blended it into a milkshake.
yeah, I'm drinking it on the rocks as I do. It's only 28%, so it's not a heavy drink, but it's actually tasting pretty good. The pistachio comes through really strong and takes me back to my roots in Sicily. So if I start breaking into an Italian accent, you'll know where I'm coming from.
It's perfect. You could make like pistachio milkshakes.
Exactly. So we want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Our numbers are going up quite a bit, Bob. I sent you that. We've got literally hundreds of listens now and a good deal of followers. And there was one guy, keeps on emailing us. We've actually got a prince from Nigeria who's very interested in the podcast and keeps on hitting our email box. I need to talk to you about. He needs some money to fund an
Yeah,
affiliate over there.
just
Uh,
give him the bank account for the pack and just have him wire all his money over to us.
so, that's true. We could do that.
Yeah,
We could have him send. We'll do a reverse scam, right? We'll
you
go the
got
other
it.
way. Hey, by the
If
way, we
case
do have.
in case he needs it, just give him your social security number too.
Yeah, that too. Sure. So we appreciate everyone listening. By way of introduction, some of you might have heard this before, but welcome to the Sensible Center podcast. I'm Kevin, a left of center guy from the terrific, warm, and horsefly infested great state of Wisconsin. And you are?
I am Bob. I think taxes are a terrible thing, and I am from Tennessee,
Does
where
anyone like taxes?
coincidentally there are no state income taxes here.
Oh, nice.
I think some people like taxes. You have to like taxes to live in California or New York, don't you?
Yep, you definitely have your fill of them there. So while we're from different political ideologies, we both believe our political system is broken and in need of reform. and we formed a political action committee by the name of Sensible Center PAC towards that goal. So I invite you to sit back, do like us, and grab some nice adult beverages and listen to this, what we believe is going to be a respectable, sometimes intelligent, and occasionally fun conversation about politics, reform, and the issues facing our country. Um, we do have a website, sensiblecenterpack.com. We have an email address, sensiblecenterpack@gmail.com. And recently added, we don't call it Twitter anymore, do we?
It is now X.
It's X. What a stupid ass name.
And we have not yet sent our first Zeet, or whatever it's supposed to be called.
They call it Zeet now?
Zeet, yes.
Oh, boy. So,
Actually, maybe we should offer to let somebody write our first Zeet for us for a donation to the pack. That would be nice.
oh, that would be nice. So we're open to suggestions.
We are at USASC PAC at USASCPAC. That's our handle on Twitter.
All right. Everyone take out the pen and paper and write that down and follow us. Give us a Zeet back and move into our DMs and we'll respond to you guys. Another thing I want to try out, maybe to get the listeners involved, is I'd like to try out some catchphrases. I think that would be good because it seems to work for like SNL characters and things like that. So here's two I'm trying out, Bob. What you talking about, Bob? Now that's a little bit of a ripoff of Different Strokes.
That's completely unique.
That's a good one. And then my other one would be, now just hold on a second there, Bob. So
That's Wisconsin-y.
now just hold on a second there, Bob. So let us know which one of those two you like, and then I could throw those into the podcast, and then you could be the owner of our catchphrase of the week.
See, that's
You
not
could use a
quite,
catchphrase
Yeah, I
on
wasn't
me, too.
prepared. I should have had a catchphrase ready for
Yeah,
you,
I
but I just
surprised
can't
you.
say.
I surprise you.
Yeah.
I do extra work. That's what I do around here. So, anyways, Bob, I think Bob, like we said before, we switched back and forth on who's going to lead the discussion, and Bob's come up with some great topics to discuss tonight. So, where are we leading off, Bob?
We are going to start with the recent Fitch downgrade of USA's credit rating from a triple A to a double A plus. So recently, Fitch, who's a rating agency, downgraded USA's credit rating. What that means is it becomes more expensive for the country to borrow money, and then of course it affects the ability of the citizens within the country to borrow cheap money as well. Fitch noted in their statement when doing so that the U.S. is on track to spend 10% of its revenue on interest by 2025. And if you look at that number, the average AAA country spends 1% of their revenue on interest. So I think probably this downgrade is way past due.
So we're better than all of them. USA. USA. USA, right?
10% to 1% sounds great. And
We're
that's
10
exactly
times
how we
better.
got into this problem. Math like that.
So you're diving right into credit ratings of the U.S. Government debt.
Yeah, because I think it's
boy.
important, right? And one of the reasons I actually chose this topic was Joe Manchin had a great line related to this, and we talked about him in the last podcast, and the third party that he's trying to get moving on alongside of uh, what's his name from Utah.
John Hutzman.
There you go, John Huntsman, the Republican. So Manchin said the downgrading of America's credit rating by Fitch represents a historic failure of leadership by both political parties and the executive branch. And he's right. He hit it right on the head. He's the one guy that you could consider center left that actually kind of stood up and said it. And he's right. I mean, that's exactly where we are. And I've got concern it's going to get worse from here.
Yeah,
We're 32 trillion in debt, and we've got no plan to pay it down. Nada.
Well, we're going to be one of the few talking about the debt today. So I looked at the Fitch downgrade and kind of the reasons behind it, and they kind of hinted at the debt ceiling standoff. Just general comments about tax cuts and new spending initiatives, and a decrease in standards of governance over the last 20 years. And I guess those are all valid reasons. Janet Yellen didn't think they were, but I guess they're all valid reasons. But I guess the point is, why should we care? So, shortly thereafter, Treasury did a 10-year bond auction. And actually, there was an improvement in demand for the 10-year bond auction. I guess they have a coverage ratio, which is how many people were looking to buy it versus how much was offered. And the ratio was 2.56 to 1. Foreign buyers made up 72% versus a near-term average of 68%. And they sold 10-year treasuries at a $38 billion of 10-year treasuries at a 3.99% yield. So the question is, does the downgrade matter? Does the level of debt we have matter? If we can sell our debt at fairly low rates, I would consider a 10-year yield of less than 4%, even in this sort of high-rate environment, inflationary environment, would be a pretty good deal.
My concern is the deficits we're running and the interest rates that are rising, feeding off each other. And what that's going to result in is a growing cost to taxpayers and a lack or a detriment to economic growth, right?
Okay.
As our deficits gets bigger, and interest rates rise, that borrowing just gets more and more expensive. So, yes, by 2025, we're estimated to have 10% of revenue spent on interest, but it's not going to take another 250 years to get to 20%, right? That's going to happen a lot faster at the rate we're going.
Okay, do I get to just let me know when I could clue our dear listeners into the modern monetary theory?
Yeah, so I think, leading into that, there's concern. I've got concern, but I think it's, Fitch has the same concern that the government will use inflation as a mechanism to reduce the real value of its debt, right? And that's going to continue to put upward pressure on interest rate. It's going to hurt things like the housing market or car manufacturers or other big ticket item manufacturers who get a lot of their business because of the ability of their customers to get cheap financing on things. And so if there's a continued concern about, debts becoming less and less valuable because of inflation, we could have a real issue. And I believe much of this inflation is a result of those who push modern monetary theory on us.
All right.
So let's cover that.
All right. This is my favorite part. So, dear listener, if you haven't heard of monetary modern monetary theory, or MMT in short, we're going to give you a uh, little lesson on modern MMT. I'll say because it's a mouthful otherwise. So basically, MMT says the government debt is fairly irrelevant for the most part. And the theory goes is as a sovereign nation who has our own fiat currency, what do we care about debt? Because we can always print more money. We can easily pay off all our debt tomorrow. Do you agree with that, Bob? We could pay off our debt tomorrow without raising taxes
Yeah,
and without cutting
inflation is a
spending.
tax. Inflation is a tax.
Well, we'll get to
But yeah,
that part. We'll get
yep.
to that part. But you agree
You
that we
could.
could pay off our debt tomorrow
You
with
could.
no
Yes, I
new
agree. Yeah.
taxes. Okay. So we could do that. So let's walk through what would happen if we did that, right? Most of our debt is held by foreign entities, lots of foreign governments, lots of foreign investors. I would say in the neighborhood, as we talked before, probably high 60s, 70% roughly. So we send them all these dollars, right? And we say, here you go. We paid off our debt. We just, we just, we wouldn't even have to print them anymore. We could just use digital numbers and just say, thank you very much. We paid off your T-bills. We're debt free. So then they're stuck with a bunch of dollars, right? Am I
Yes.
correct? They're
Yep.
going to have dollars in their account, and everyone who's holding treasuries is going to have dollars in their account. So then where does that go, right? Do they buy things with dollars and drive up prices, as you said, with inflation, or do they then look for another investment for those dollars? I would say largely they'll probably look for an investment because they
Who?
had.
But who? Again, you get to that point, right? You're now devaluing the dollar to such a point that those who are going to buy debt or invest
Oh,
in
you haven't
the
devalued the
money
currency
holder,
yet. Nothing's
the
devalued the
minute the
currency.
minute you pay off all that debt with brand new dollars, the
Mm,
currency becomes devalued.
not necessarily.
It's
The
out
value of
there.
the value of the currency is set by the currency markets and the demand for the currency, right? So
Well,
it very
I mean, demand
mild.
for the currency does drive the value,
Okay, so it
but
very
if there's
way melt. It could lower the value of the currency, but not necessarily. It's kind of you have to kind of walk through what they're going to do with those
but
that
but
money.
let's
So
look at some recent examples, right? I mean, and I'm sure you can kind of expect what I'm going to say here, but debt monetization resulted in a lot of failures. There's a lot of examples out there. Zimbabwe is probably the biggest one because it was relatively recent.
don't compare
But
us to
Venezuela,
Zimbabwe.
Brazil, Weimar Germany, right? They did the same thing. They printed money, and it resulted in catastrophic failure. And that's not all of them. That's just a few. But I don't want to
None of those
run
were
off the
the
list, right?
none of those were the biggest, most integrated economy in the history of the world either. But
And our debt to GDP ratio right now, it was 53% in 1960, 34% in 1980, 58% in 2000, and 129% in 2020. And the closest time I could find to that 129% was around right after World War II. As World War II ended, it was around 119%. And so what that tells me We have a wartime deficit and a peacetime economy, and it's not sustainable. And again, there's no plan whatsoever to pay down our $32 trillion in debt. We're going to probably have another $22 trillion in debt 10 years from now.
I mean,
Unless,
to that point, I would say we've been fighting a war for 20 plus years. You could call it the war on terror, but we fought in Iraq, Afghanistan. Now we're fighting what I would consider a proxy battle in the Ukraine against Russia. We had a global pandemic, which didn't occur in the last 100 plus years. So we have been through some stuff. We were almost debt free or close to debt free at the end of the Clinton administration. 9/11 happened, and we expanded government in many ways with Homeland Security, spent a lot of money boosting our security, fighting wars, whatnot. Whether you think that's a valid reason for doing it or not, we could argue about that. But to say that we've been in a peacetime situation, I don't think is accurate. So there's reasons why we've spent that money. Sure, some of it's been wasted as it typically is. I'm not trying to justify our level of debt, but I'm saying let's look at it realistically based upon what we've been through and where we're headed. I don't like the fact. I don't know if MMT works or not. So let me finish with the MMT. So MMT basically says we don't really care about that. We care about inflation and unemployment, which is basically what the Fed cares about, right? I mean, that's basically what you hear. We'll keep on raising rates as long as employment looks good, so we don't tank the economy, and we'll fight inflation down to whatever target rate we choose, which they're stuck on 2%, which I think is a little bit low. So, in theory, that's kind of what the Fed is doing, and they're using their balance sheet, the Treasury's balance sheet, and the Fed's balance sheet to buy debt and do quantitative easing and putting money in and out of the economy based upon those two targets. So there's a little bit of history behind this. But anyway, so all this, if we pay it off tomorrow, all these dollars are going to be floating around. My guess is a good deal of it will go into financial assets, which will likely drive up the stock market, right? So your 401k will actually increase. I don't think they're going to necessarily buy milk at your grocery store with those dollars. So why would the price of your milk go up at that point, right?
the vast majority of money that has been printed in the history of the United States was done in the last 3 or 5 years. And some of the worst inflation in history happened in the last year and a half.
Oh, Bob, read your economic history. This inflation is mild.
Compared to the 70s. Yep. Sure. But
compared to I could go back in history of this country many times when inflation was much more rampant. Our inflation in this country is more under control than numerous other countries who aren't in our debt situation.
It's also calculated much differently.
We're not going to get into it.
The way
what
it's
you talking about, Bob?
The basket of goods, right? The basket of goods. That's how that's part of how it's calculated, right? So you save $250 on your TV because it's manufactured overseas, and also you save a little extra money in the calculation because now you get a remote with the TV, and you didn't get the remote with the TV 50 years ago, right? But my point is, okay, you save $250 on your TV. Your TV is that much cheaper than it was a few years back. However, your house, to go buy a starter house now, it's $450,000 if you can find one, right? Starter house used to be under $100,000. It's a different world. And you can't tell me that housing inflation
You're
doesn't matter.
sounding like an old man now.
Well,
Just hold on a
that's one of
second
the many
there,
problems
Bob.
I've had today. Yeah.
I've used the catchphrase twice. We should make a drinking game. When I say, just hold on there a second, Bob, have a drink.
All right, you got it.
So Bob's argument is that inflation is being not miscalculated, but massaged to make it look a little better than, or a lot better than, maybe it historically has. I
Sure.
would
Go
say
take the
go back
inflation
and read your
calculation from the 70s
go
and
back
apply
and
that
read your
exact calculation to today. You're going to find out inflation's a lot higher than they're saying it is.
go back and read your history books before we had a Fed, before we had taxes or much debt in this country. We had inflation. So, and lots of it. Um, so, what I'm saying is, as I'm walking through this scenario, and I would say that you don't have to pay off all the debt at once, but we could do it in chunks. I mean, basically, that's what the Fed's been doing anyway. They introduce money into the, so we could say, well, we're gonna balance ourselves from now on, and then we're gonna pay off $3 trillion a year and just put it back out and pay these investors off. And I'm guessing, like I said, that'll go into financial assets, and financial assets will be bid up. So I'm not saying that I'm all for a balanced budget. I think we should live within our means. I do think there is a time and place for incurring debt to manage the swings in the business cycle and tax revenues, and when countries need to spend money and when they don't. But I think we should work to an even keel so we don't accumulate debt. I'm all for that, but I'm saying now that we have 30 plus trillion of debt, what's realistically the scenario that we work our way out of it? And it's most likely we're not going to raise taxes so much. And yes, it will trickle through. There'll be some inflation. Nobody knows how much it will be. It will, if we do this and keep introducing money, inflation will run hotter. But I don't think anyone knows exactly how that would play out. And I don't think MMT.
And you see, that's where we are now. We're going down the path of, well, yeah, we're gonna let inflation run hotter because we've dug ourselves in such a hole. There's really, I mean, and now we're getting downgraded, right? So that debt is going to accumulate more debt in this terms of interest, I should say, more expense in terms of interest than ever before. You're going to be printing a lot of money.
I just pointed out it doesn't necessarily move the needle because we're still, and our debt is still very well valued. We have almost 3 times as many investors looking to buy it than we're selling at this level of debt. I'm all for you. We should work our way down, but I don't think MMT's been disproven. I know that you have indicated it has because we've had 8% inflation during a pandemic. I think there was global supply issues. I will point to many other countries that don't have our debt situation who are having a more difficult time getting inflation under control.
Well, just because, I mean, we're lucky that we're the reserve currency, right? But that does not make economic theory any less relevant.
But we are, because we're a vibrant economy, a free market economy that innovates. And so people want to invest in this country. And to invest in this country, they need U.S. dollars.
If people were truly investing, or that, buying our debt at such a level that it mattered, we wouldn't have rates continuing to rise.
Oh, rates are, 4% for a 10-year debt?
You can get 5 out there.
That's a steal.
Get over 5 out there.
That is a bet
but
that
it's
over
continuing
those,
to rise, which
I
tells
mean,
me that demand is not increasing. Demand is still lower historically.
that means that somebody is investing in that money with the thought that we're going to have inflation. You know, I would hope that they would want a 2% return over a 10-year horizon. So the real rate of return with a 2% inflation is 2%. If our inflation was over 4%, what are you doing, right?
Well, it ticked
I
up
mean,
today, right? It ticked up to 3.2, I think,
well, it
3.1.
it goes back and well, inflation's coming down. But anyways, so I think we've covered that quite a bit. But
Yeah.
um,
Let's
I don't think MMT's buried. I think that isn't. I think that is important, but I think we need to not consider it like a household debt because the federal government can pay off the debt tomorrow without raising taxes. And I don't think people think of it that way. Um,
inflation's a tax.
you don't know what inflation would be. I just presented a scenario where you'd have very little inflation. In fact,
Well, I
your
mean, a year ago I could
401k
go to
might
the
go up.
grocery store for $120 and now it's 300. I mean, for the same basket of goods,
All right.
it's not, I mean, that's inflation,
All right.
right? And modern monetary theory, like it or not, was being pushed for the last 2, 3 years, and here we are.
All
Yes,
right.
there's, the pandemic happened, everything else, but I mean, where's the line? When do you
All right.
determine that it's modern monetary theory causing this inflation? If we get 5 years down the road and it flares up again, I mean,
Okay. We're gonna start reaching out to guests, and I'll reach out to Bernie before the next podcast and ask him to appear on the podcast and defend MMT. We'll see what response we could get back. I'll
may as
read the
well.
response from Bernie's office.
If any economic professors want to come on and tell me I'm wrong, I'd love you to do that. I'll still
I, ju-
disagree with you.
I just told you were wrong. I'm not a professor. But
Yeah,
I'm not.
you
I've
do
had
have a
enough.
master's,
I've had enough
right?
education in economics to qualify me to be saying that that doesn't matter.
That's
All
a fair
right.
point.
Um, let's move on to the other topic, and I'll take this one from here. I read um, the transcript of Devin Archer, who is Hunter Biden's business associate. And we're going to get to talk about corruption here and what's corruption. But I did read the transcript, and my initial impression, I don't know if you read the transcript, Bob, or not. You read bits and pieces of
Yeah,
it.
I've read most of it, not all of it.
So my
Probably.
initial take was the I didn't think it worked in the Republicans' favor because I don't think they knew what he was going to say. And yes, he did say Joe appeared on numerous calls, 20 plus calls on speakerphone, but he basically said Joe didn't, in his presence, talk about anything besides the weather and kind of where they were at. So I had this idea in my mind on, maybe a scenario on how this could have happened, and I'm willing to present it before the oversight committee. But so just imagine, dear listener, that old man Joe, what do we call him? Grandpa Joe, Uncle Joe,
Uncle Joe, maybe.
Uncle Joe's sitting in his office. He was vice president at the time. This wasn't when he was president, so he really had little to do. He's got the old aviators on, staring out the window, um, waiting for Barack to call him into the office on something, probably eating, popcorn or whatnot. And
Ice cream.
his cell phone rings, and of course it's the Miami Vice theme song. If you remember that back from the '80s, that was the showdown with Don Johnson. So it's the Miami Vice theme song, if I had a drop in here, I'd play it, but I don't. So he looks at, and of course, the Miami Vice theme comes from his son Hunter. So he's assigned the Miami Vice theme to Hunter, um, and so he looks at the phone and he's like, "Oh, isn't it out nice that my only living son is calling me? How thoughtful of him." Um, but then so he picks it up. Um, and interesting. Hunter typically will call, maybe I guess they call often, but let's just imagine this is on the date of the passing of the death date of his brother Bo, who had passed several years ago, unfortunately, of cancer. So Hunter Hunter calls dear old Joe and says, you know, and Hunter has set up meetings. Well, I won't get into it, but Joe picks up and says, "Hey, Dad." Hunter's like, "Hey, Dad, just thinking about you. Missed the sound of your voice. That was really too bad about Bo, huh? I missed him too. Oh, say, Dad, I have a couple buddies here with me at my AA meeting that would like to say hi to you." So this is an imaginary scenario, and as an aside, I'm not imputing anything upon the Biden family or the Biden crime family, as they say on Fox News, because I don't I don't need the FBI coming over here and putting a bullet in my head. But you heard that story, right, Bob?
Yes, I did today.
Right.
Yep.
I'm just saying, this is all theoretical, based upon what I read on the transcript. So, do I need to say this is alleged or whatnot? This is just a hypothetical scenario. So he says, I'm at this meeting, this AA meeting with my friends, and they'd like to say hi to you. Yes, Dad, friends of Bill and all. What, Dad? Okay, I'll say it just because I love you so much. And Joe loves to hear Hunter say this. So he says, I haven't touched cocaine in years, Dad. Yep. I've been a good boy, he says. Okay, here we go. And so this is a line that Joe just gets a kick out of. So Hunter says, okay, Dad, say hello to my little friends. It's the Scarface line, and Joe just gets a kick out of it because, Hunter, had a problem with cocaine. So Joe just gets a kick out of it. So he says, hold on, let me put you on speakerphone. Okay, Dad, you there? And then, Joe talks about the weather. He's an old guy. He's sitting around. He wants to know what they're reading. Talks about the weather. And he notices a kind of a Ukrainian accent, a Russian Ukrainian. Joe's pretty good with accents. He's been around the block a little bit. And he's thinking to himself, he gets that confused look on his face. And so he takes off the aviator glasses and begins to rub his forehead, and then has a vague recollection that this happens many times before. And he's like, oh boy, Hunter got me again. Now, isn't that a nice scenario to think of? See,
and then everybody laughs like at the end of the
everybody
sitcom.
laughs like it's a sitcom. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like a sitcom. Oh, and then the music plays. And did it. No, nothing harmful. It's just a father who loves his son, knows his son is a little bit, well, maybe more than a little bit of a mess up, allegedly. But, takes all his phone calls, gets on the speakerphone, and then he's like, oh, man, I've been had again.
Did you see?
Do you buy this scenario?
Oh, of course I do, right?
Yes.
Nothing
it
but...
can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
Did you see the...
That didn't go as well as I thought, but...
it came across. I understand what you're getting at, right?
All right.
So, it's a perfect lead-in because we had a list come out today or yesterday, right? Released by somebody in Congress, Comer, detailing over $20 million in payments from foreign entities to the Biden family, $3.5 million to a shell company associated with Hunter and Devin Archer, right?
They don't deserve to make money?
1 million per year each from Burisma.
Yep.
A sports car was purchased by wire.
Uh-huh.
Um, Kazakhstani oligarch paid for that. And significant amounts of money came from individuals that Vice President Biden had dinner with in Washington, D.C. in both 2014 and 2015. Right, and those were Russian oligarch, I believe the wife of the mayor of Moscow and others, right? So, I mean, there's
I think Devin said that he was at the dinner probably, I think somewhere between 15 minutes and a half an hour. It was at the Cafe Milano, which I guess is the place to be seen in Washington. Although I looked at the menu, it's an Italian restaurant. Actually, he met both the in-person meetings with people were at the Cafe Milano. So if you want to see Joe, might want to check Joe and Hunter and some oligarchs. Make a
talk about the
reservation at the
weather.
Cafe Milano in Washington, D.C. But you're right. I mean, there's clearly money flowing, and we kind of want to get into the talk about what is corruption. That's kind of the lead in here. And so, that was a joke scenario, but it's a question of where is the line. So I think the line, as it's currently drawn, is not influence peddling. It's not granting access. It's not introducing your father. Do you agree with that? The line.
Well,
That's not
from a legal standpoint, that's not the line, right? That's not across the line. From a legal
right.
standpoint, it's not.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
From from an implied ethical standpoint, which again is not legal, it's not. I mean, it's over the line. I think it's clear to any reasonable individual what was happening. The question is whether or not it can be proven that it was happening, and
What
without
was
very
happening?
clear evidence
What
that
was happening?
that the vice president
Okay.
was influencing law or
No, I don't think any
money
reasonable person would think
or
that.
money
No.
flow in exchange for money, right? I'll send you taxpayer money, or I will give you contracts, government contracts,
But
or
you're
I will
overstating the
create
case. You're overstating the case
favorable
at this
trade
point.
agreements in exchange for money, right? In this
Well, that
case, a business deal for Hunter,
what you're
right?
stating is the line, is the quid pro quo. So that is the line
You
that
have to prove
needs
it.
to be proven, right?
And it's difficult to prove when you're sharing a bank account with your son
So why
rather
would
than the money being directly into a loan bank account, right? It's very difficult to prove.
well, you have to prove it. I mean, that's our system.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fair. And I think it, you know, there's email evidence out there that Joe knew what was going on and that there were some shady things going on. Um,
well, without getting into the specifics of the case, because
yeah, I think you want to stay kind of more above that and talk about
yeah,
corruption generally speaking.
yeah, I mean, we're both for, hey, if that stuff is going on, it can be proven. We need to route that out as much as possible, and I'll wait for the evidence to show up. I read the transcript. I think it didn't work in their favor because he specifically said he was never in a place where they talked any business at all, which is just the start of trying to prove a case, because not only do you have to prove that they talked about it, you have to prove that money went for a particular favor. That's a high bar. I mean, the the Supreme Court ruled unanimously on this. And, I did some research. The case was a handful of years ago. Governor McDonald in Virginia, which is a tobacco state, had a tobacco extract company. He had events at the governor's mansion for the company and received gifts from the company. Well, we could talk about, Clarence Thomas too whenever we get to that, because I just saw he's in the news again for all the gifts and things he's received. So he was promoting at the governor's mansion after receiving gifts from the CEO of the company. And the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that this was not illegal. It was not a corrupt act. It said an official act does not include merely setting up a meeting, calling another public official, or hosting an event. There's the Hobbs Act, there's extortion. I mean, I think we're both on board that we need to get much stronger in regards to that stuff. I wish none of this would occur, and I don't think it should occur. But you also have lobbyists, and you have people.
Specifically in Hunter's case, though, there's things you can go after him. Not registering as a foreign agent would be
absolutely.
a big one, right?
That's Hunter.
Yep. And there's countless cases of people that should have been registering as foreign agents and didn't and weren't charged. There's cases where people were, and then that's where you get in a question of political favor or not.
That's right. Paul Manafort, I think they hooked him on that one.
Yeah. So, yeah, the corruption, I mean, really the biggest way, the best, most direct way, I think, to get rid of some of it is find a way to massively cut down on lobbyists. And I think maybe one way to do that is move a lot of the stuff out of D.C., right? You could take any department you want. Move the Department of Agriculture out of D.C. Move the FBI out of Washington, D.C. Move the CIA out of Washington, D.C. Put things in far corners of the country. And then you don't have such a concentration of lobbyists, et cetera, living right there, right? That would help, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things you could do. And, I don't, just to be clear, I don't like that the vice president's son was sitting on the board of a Ukrainian gas company. I don't think it was illegal at the time. You're right. If he's technically a foreign agent, he needs to register. I would think that case might be easier to prove than any kind of direct quid pro quo corruption. I don't know how we draw the line. I mean, Trump kept his business interests going, foreign governments and various entities.
Clinton Foundation wasn't exactly on the up and up either.
Absolutely. I mean, but, and I'm all, it's just sort of where we want to draw the line. Clearly, there are many avenues for money coming into the system and for side hustles and whatnot. And, I tend to believe if you run for a public office or you hold a position of public trust, that you need to make certain sacrifices. And one of those sacrifices may be your son can't work for a Ukrainian gas company and sit on the board and draw $1 million salary. There's got to be certain rules that we can write in that we could all agree to that, yeah, it might not be, but appearances matter. And we need to rebuild trust in our system. And to get to that, we need to make sure things don't appear, as you said, a reasonable person could assume something's going on, right?
And term limits for public service as a whole would, help there. And I don't just mean for a representative. I mean, if you spend 6 years in the House, you get, no time in the Senate. If you
Right.
spend 6 years in the Senate, you get no time in the House. You get no time as president, for that matter. You go be a governor somewhere. I think that'd be fair, right? States' rights. But uh, by doing that, you create less legacy opportunity for family members, close friends, lawyers, right, to act on your behalf and be corrupt.
Yeah, and getting circling back and kind of wrapping this up, you know, that's one of the things we're looking for as far as candidates in the pack. People with a strong anti-corruption agenda and anti-corruption policy agenda to route out some of the stuff, because we're not going to rebuild trust if we keep on under the current system of law. Um,
And
and
if you're a candidate or you know a candidate who fits that mold and you'd like to come on the show, or they would like to come on the show, the podcast, I should say, um, please contact us and come talk. And we'll be handing out donations as we raise money to candidates who support anti-corruption efforts as well as others.
yep, absolutely. So that was a good discussion on corruption. I hope everyone sort of kind of gets kind of the distinction between what's, quote unquote above the law versus what is clearly against the law. And, we think the law needs to be revised to capture a lot of this gray area. So what else do we got tonight?
Interstate migration.
Interstate migration? What you talking about, Bob?
Well, we're not talking about the illegal kind.
Not the illegal kind. You've
We're
seen some migration towards your state?
Yes, I am a migrant, if you consider that. My state is one of the top 10 states in the nation. Florida, Texas, North Carolina, Arizona, South Carolina, Tennessee, Nevada, Idaho, Colorado, and Utah are the top states for net positive migration. Can you pick out the one state there that is different?
No.
Florida, Texas, North Carolina, Arizona, South Carolina, Tennessee, Nevada, Idaho, Colorado, Utah. I'll help you out here. Only Colorado is controlled by Democrats.
Oh.
But
the trick question.
The thing that's unique about Colorado is they cap a rise in state spending at the rate of population growth plus inflation. So just to kind of restate, the state is not going to spend $1 more unless that dollar correlates to a rise in population growth or inflation dictates that it needs to happen. Also, all state tax increases are put on a ballot. So in a general election statewide, the state gets to vote whether or not that tax increase goes through.
So why do you think this is happening? So you're saying you're positing the theory people are fleeing democratic regimes, to use a Fox News word, and going to swallowing the red pill and going to red states for what reason? Pursuit of happiness?
Well, it's a chicken or the egg sort of thing, I think. But yeah, pursuit of happiness. That's generally speaking, that's it. Jobs, low taxes, right? Do the jobs follow the low taxes, or does the low taxes influence people to move down and the jobs follow the workers, right? I'm not sure exactly how that works, but I think generally speaking, it's low taxes, it's jobs.
So isn't it,
That said, I do think crime also plays a role in that to a lesser extent. I've got a lot of anecdotal conversations that I've had over the last year of people that have moved to this state from California, New York, Illinois, my whole new neighborhood. It's California. I've met four people so far in the neighborhood from California, one from Texas, and then me from a blue state, right? So they all kind of have the same story.
so you got a bunch of
Had
liberal
to get
neighbors?
away. No, they're all conservatives. They moved out from California for conservative reasons. Generally speaking, the answer at first is politics until you get to know them a little better, and then it's the taxes. I had to get away from the taxes. I had to get away from the crime, raising kids. It's not. It won't be safe when my kid's old enough to walk to the store for me to let them walk down the block to the store because there's people sleeping on my front lawn and all the sidewalks in between there. Um, Especially people who came from the cities of California are very concerned about crime um, and the homeless problem. Those who came from the less populated areas of California, generally speaking, they felt like they weren't being represented very well for their values, and they wanted to get out. That and taxes.
So do you think we're going through like a self sorting? Do you think uh, Tennessee's going to be more of a red state because of this, even though they're coming from California, or do you think they're gonna end up being less conservative than the typical conservative in
You-
Tennessee?
I think it's going to get more red, and I read an article a few days ago actually, and I wish I remembered where the article was from. I just remembered right now. They did a study on Texas voters, and they split them up between people who had newly migrated to the state and people who had lived there for more than 10 years. And they found that the people who had moved to the state recently were more conservative than the people who had already lived there by a pretty significant margin. Um, and by more conservative, I mean not just in population, but also in conservative value. So it was a more extreme version of conservatism. Um, and I think a lot of that's happening here too. Now that said, I think California, for instance, will get more solidly blue for the same reason that the conservative states will get more solidly red. What's going to happen, though, as a result of that, is less representation in Congress for the states that people are moving out of, and more representation in Congress and more electoral votes for the states people are moving into. And it could have a minor, I think, over time effect on elections and the makeup of Congress.
You had mentioned they start with sort of maybe political reasons, but you think at the end of the day it could be economic reasons why people are moving.
Yeah, a lot of jobs
So I
because
would
the red states are more corporate friendly as well, right? It's not just personal tax; it's corporate tax, it's workman's comp, it's you know all the stuff that goes along with it. Influences where jobs are going to go.
yeah, I mean I've had this race to the bottom theory for a while. Um, I think it started with Texas and has expanded to other states that they reduce taxes, they provide incentives to businesses to bring them in, um, tax incentives, whatnot, and yes, the jobs will follow, but then they cut back on services and education and all that other good stuff. So while jobs are there and then another state will compete to get the company at a better deal and offer new incentives. So then the business will go and leave and go somewhere else. So, what are we really doing there? I mean, it's a little bit of crony capitalism, if you ask me, um, and we as citizens then have to chase our employer around the country to go where jobs are. Um,
Well, not
and not
necessarily. A lot of them are remote now, right?
well, I'm just saying historically before COVID, but
Yep.
I think that's kind of what I've been seeing this happen over the last 20 or 25 years, and I don't know where it ends. I haven't done that. I haven't um, gone to a state where they're trying to attract. I moved from Illinois to Wisconsin. Probably not that big a difference between how their general views on things. Wisconsin's more of a purple state. Um, I think with a lot of people working remotely from Illinois, it may be becoming more purple as I see people from Illinois moving out to some of the rural areas in Wisconsin that typically weren't. Um, and that's part of my theory too. Is if people move out of California for economic reasons, be it housing or even crime, as you said, they might still have different political tendencies and turn. I think Georgia might be a little bit like that.
Yep.
Arizona's probably seen it more than a lot of places where Californians are moving. Um,
It's the
and maybe
proximity there, I think, does make a difference, right?
and
Proximity would play
right,
out in California to Arizona, Illinois to Wisconsin.
yeah, I would say that yeah, they might make those states more purple and more in contention than they would have been. And I always thought it might make sense, and this will lead into our discussion on, as you mentioned, what effect they would have on elections and representation. I always thought it might make sense for the Democrats to pay a bunch of people from California to move to Wyoming. They could easily probably swing an election with 25,000 people, pick up two senators, move on to South Dakota next, uh, and just kind of bust people out there and give them, a new Homestead Act or something. It's got to be cheaper than how we're running our campaigns now. Just move the people to the states.
Yeah, I kind of started fearing that, and I think you and I had talked about it back when COVID started, that some of that was going to start happening naturally. But I also think that it's easier said than done. Again, if you have many conservatives intentionally moving to those states as well, now that they can work remotely,
Right.
it's not just 25 anymore because you have 25,000 conservatives, so you need to send 50,000 liberals, right? And then of course, right, liberals generally tend to like to live in cities, so it's going to be difficult to get potentially large amounts of liberals to go live on the live on a ranch,
I think they like
where the
Wyoming, though.
nearest Starbucks is 50 miles away.
They like nature. You can find enough granolas in Northern California, especially tech guys. Just move, part of Silicon Valley out to Wyoming, and we'll swing that state. So this gets us into the discussion of representation, and this has always been a ballywick of mine that, as we're talking about individual states and migration, Wyoming has 580,000 people. They have 2 U.S. senators, correct?
Every state has 2 U.S. senators.
California has 39 million people. California has 2 U.S. senators. You do the math, it's actually 67 times, if you just take it by the population, 67 times the representation Wyoming has. And I know you're saying, well, the House is based upon population, the Senate, 2 from every state. But the way the political system is now, with the filibuster and what happens in the Senate, basically, with 2 senators, you have a lot of power.
So are you arguing that both the House and the Senate should be based on population?
I'm arguing that that's misrepresent. I'm arguing that the people of California are being underrepresented in our Congress.
I
Prove me,
disagree.
prove me otherwise. How are they not?
Checks and balances. It was a
Checks and
compromise. If
balances.
you the country was founded on that compromise, on that agreement. If you
I don't care.
if you go back on that agreement, then the state should have every right to go back on the agreement to join the union.
They had slavery too. So if we're
They
gonna
had slavery, but that wasn't a
if we're
condition
if we're
for
gonna
that
go
wasn't a
back
condition for
and if we're
being.
gonna go back and say
That's
they were
ridiculous.
perfect and we can't change anything,
No,
that
no,
doesn't
but
work.
that wasn't a
They,
condition for joining the union. The legality of slavery.
do you think they had an idea that California would have 39 million people, the fifth largest economy in the world?
Sure.
Do you think
How many
our
people?
founders
How,
envisioned that at the time? I
how
don't
many
think
people
so.
did New York have compared to South Carolina?
I mean, I
Or
think
well, it
all
would have been
those.
Carolina at the time.
I think they were all fairly. They weren't as divergent as they are now.
I bet
I,
they were
I'll I'll
from
I'll
a
I'll go
percentage standpoint.
I'll go look it up, but it was mostly rural. There were some cities, but cities weren't very large back then.
Yeah, but
Um,
I think you. I think
20,000, thirty
there.
thousand people at most.
Yeah, Boston, New York probably
But they
had
weren't
a
huge
pretty large
cities.
preference.
There wasn't a lot of concentration. So you're saying, sorry, California, there's
Our
nothing we could
population.
do. How about this? I saw, this isn't my idea. I saw it out there. Every state, sort of like, the baseball all-star game. No matter how stinky your team is, not that Wyoming's stinky. Wyoming's a beautiful state. They just don't have many people. You get one. You get one. You get
Isn't that the case? Doesn't that happen? It is
so
the All Star
everyone
game, right?
gets. Yeah, it is the All Star game.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
every every baseball team gets one. Then you apportion on population, and if you did it, you could have 110 representatives. So every state gets one, and then you apportion the rest, the other 60. So California, if you did the math, California would have 12 out of 110. Texas would have 9.
But that's not how it works in the All Star game. Every team gets one, but then it's based on votes.
Well, the analogy's not perfect. The point is, you get one, and then you get another how many based upon your population. So you're represented in the Senate. You're just not overrepresented. How about that? Can you
I don't like it.
agree to that? You don't like it.
No,
Why?
absolutely not. Because every state, I mean, the equal representation
Why?
is balanced out by the population representation, and that ensures that the smaller states
Have
aren't.
outsized power.
It ensures the smaller states have a say, a meaningful say, and aren't overruled by the individual larger states over time.
They have more say than they should have, than they have people.
If Texas
I think
was
this is
double the size of any other state in the union and remained conservative, if you had that system set up in place, Texas would overwhelmingly create law.
what do you mean? Texas would
Because
have,
Texas would have a majority of Texas, just theoretically, could have the majority of senators if they got large enough. and the
they're
majority
not large
of
enough.
representatives.
They're,
But
they would have 9.
let's talk 1,000 years out.
Well, now you're talking hypotheticals. You're talking
Right. Well,
the whole country's moving to Texas.
could happen.
Okay,
I mean,
the
if
whole
this,
then the whole
if
country
this
is
global
Texas,
warming thing
and they
happens,
should be
and
overrepresented, right? If the whole country lives in Texas, they should have all
no,
the
because
representation.
Texas doesn't know what's best for New York, and California doesn't know what's
There's
best
nobody
for
living in New York.
New Hampshire.
You just
It
said.
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter then or now. If there's one person living in New York City, that person, two people living in New York City, that adult knows what's best, what their kid needs to learn. Should be teaching their kid what they need to learn, not what Texas thinks they need to learn.
They've got their own legislature. They can make their decisions. I'm talking about federal government making
The
decisions
federal
for the
government
whole
holds back
nation
education
and the
funding
whole
based
nation.
upon what the local schools teach.
It's still mostly local control.
It's not.
The legislatures in each state could decide. Well, I'm not giving up state control. That's built in the Constitution too. All those state rights, all those reserve powers, all of that's still there. New Yorkers could live how they want. They cannot. I don't know how we got on New York having less people, but let's say Wyoming, they could have whatever they want. They cannot decide largely with their 2 senators because we're so divided evenly what the rest of the country is going to do.
They're
I
not.
don't
They
think
still. The
yes,
House
they
is still
are.
out there. California
House,
still
come
has
on.
the House out there.
It's got to pass. It's got to pass House and Senate. We
There
all
it
know
is.
we all know the
That's
gig,
right.
and there's a filibuster.
But
so
if
you
they're
gotta,
both
you
based on
gotta have 60.
population, if they're both based on population,
Oh, come
then
on.
you might as well not even have the vote. You can vote in one or the other, and it's going to pass.
You get a representative. The rest is a portion of that population. I honestly think this is part of the reason why, amongst a million other things, that people don't feel represented. Because there are lots of people living in certain states, and they get 2 senators, and they hear about this guy from this state and that guy from that state, which doesn't have much of a population, deciding what the policy is for the whole country. So we could get it. Well, we're not going to agree on that. We could get into the Electoral College because we both agree that should be done away with, right?
I don't know about that.
What you talking about, Bob?
I'm on the fence on that one. I think it could potentially stand some reform, but I wouldn't want to get rid of it. I mean, you could make the argument that it needs reform, but you absolutely have to keep some form of it.
So
you can't just go country popular vote because, again, the population centers, which all lean one way, and you pick New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Houston, those big cities.
Why do we talk about population centers as a bad thing? It's like
people in
population
Cairo,
centers.
Illinois,
where the people live, where Americans live. It's that right.
Americans live everywhere.
The conservative mentality that only Americans live in real America. Population centers are where Americans live. But that kind of language, population centers, indicates to me that's where Americans live. A majority of Americans.
Education as an example, right? If you live in downtown Chicago, your kids probably don't need to learn farming, right? But if you live in Decatur, Illinois, chances are your kids need some farming skills, and their education should be tailored for that, right? You live in downtown Chicago, you probably don't need to learn mechanical skills. You live in Decatur, Illinois, fixing tractors or fixing vehicles, fixing appliances, probably going to be a bit more important, and your education needs to be tailored that way. And if you let
What are we
a
talking about?
population
We're
center
talking about the
that doesn't
Department of
reflect
Education
the
again?
population, well, and that's one example, and it's the one that came to mind for me right now. But if you let the population centers control laws, control values, control the government, then there's going to be a large portion of the country and the population that that are going to be at a disadvantage. No doubt about it.
So one vote, one vote doesn't matter. Equal representation doesn't matter. We'll just throw that out the window.
The
I
states
mean,
can split the states. The states can split off. I
what
mean,
what
maybe
upsets
that's what
me.
maybe we should make it easier to do, right? You should make it easier for Illinois to cut itself off at I-80 and California to cut itself off at
Oh,
I-5.
come
Same with
on,
Washington and Oregon. I mean, it should
come
be a
on.
lot easier to do. They want to do
We're
it.
not we're not
Let
going
them
to
take
redraw
that
the
vote,
lines.
and so be it.
So this is what gets me upset: is in a national election, we all know that only a handful of states really get the attention, right? They don't even bother campaigning it. Well, especially Hillary didn't bother campaigning in a lot of places that she should have. Um, but they ignore, right? I mean, they're
Sure.
paying attention. The Republicans are all in Iowa now because that's the first primary. Um, but they'll pay a lot of attention to Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. You can name, the states where they're going to campaign. They're going to spend money. Not only not only that, you can also say possibly there'll be favor trading, that those states will get more whatever because they need to swing the vote in that state more. So maybe they'll promise more, be it, if it's an agricultural state, they'll promise to bring dollars there or build a plant there or whatever. Terribly unfair to the rest of the country, right? 45 states get ignored. 5 states get all the attention. That's one thing.
Do you think
Um,
swinging the other way would fix that?
I'm I'll go into my proposal on how that's going to work and what's already been done from a reform standpoint on this point. There's actually been tons of progress towards getting rid of the Electoral College. It's much closer than a lot of people think. Um, and also, I think it discourages participation in those lock states. So, because they know, I mean, coming from Illinois, you kind of knew that it was going to swing towards a Democratic for a presidential or even a national election, right? So, does it discourage some of the? It probably discourages participation all around, right?
Absolutely.
From the left and the right, which then distorts things. And if people aren't voting, they don't feel represented again. So, and people need to feel represented to be part of the system, to buy into the system. And I think the Electoral College works against that. So let me get to what's happening. And I don't know if you know about this, but there's a national popular vote interstate compact already. 16 states have already adopted this, and the District of Columbia. And what this means is that these states have agreed to award all their electoral votes to whichever candidate wins the overall popular vote in all 50 states.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
So, 16 states, clearly more blue states than red states. The population centers: New York, California, Washington, Illinois, Oregon, Colorado, New Mexico, Massachusetts,
How
Vermont.
many states did that by putting it on the ballot, by the way, versus letting their legislators sign the document? Because
I,
if you want to argue
I
for,
think Illinois put it on the ballot.
popular vote and popular resident, it's not.
I'll look that up, but I wouldn't. I think a good deal of them put it on the ballot because I think they have to change their constitution possibly. Um, so it's been adopted by. It was introduced in 2006, adopted by
Yep.
16 states. They've got 205 electoral votes. So the math says um, they only need to get to 270, right?
Yep.
So they only need another. What's that?
65.
Six is, yeah, 65.
65.
And I
Yep.
guess 63 are currently pending, which means states are considering that. Because if you get to 270, it doesn't matter what all the other states do.
Yep.
Um,
I mean, from the standpoint of states' rights, it's hard for me to argue that. I don't like it. I think if I lived in one of those states, I would be quite upset about it.
why?
Because again, you're ceding your power to other states and other regions that may not reflect your values or needs.
Yeah, but it's a national election. Shouldn't the person who wins the popular vote win the election? I mean,
No,
I mean, let alone the person
absolutely
who doesn't.
not. I mean, again,
No,
you know,
okay.
we're representative democracy. We're not a full-blown democracy, or a representative republic, I should say, not a democracy. That's
Yeah,
why.
yeah. My viewpoint is we were 13 colonies back then. The country has changed quite a bit, and I'm always more of a federalist to begin with, because I like to live in the United States of America. I think that's where our power is. I don't like the idea of. I don't even like the idea that you could buy marijuana in one state and the other state you could be locked up in jail for it. I think it's insane.
Yeah, I
Um,
think. Well, that's again, it comes down to states' rights.
but I don't think that's
It's
good.
hard for me to argue against it.
Well, it's easy for me to argue because I think it's insane.
Yeah, that's
I'm an
fair.
I'm an American first. Back then, they weren't Americans first because there was an America. Number one, they were all very parochial, local.
I think.
People didn't move as often. They lived in places for generations. The mindset was totally different than where we're
They
at now.
also, you're right, but there was also less signs of corruption in our government
Well, that's a whole
at that
other
point in
issue.
time. I think if
That's a
you,
whole.
I think if you get people to trust their government again, and through major reform, then I think you might find people are a little more open to it. But I certainly don't trust the government of California with creating laws that are going to benefit me. As a matter of fact, I trust them more to hurt me through law than I do help me through law.
Well,
I don't trust them, and I don't live there.
you don't have to trust the state of California. You have to trust the United
Sure you do.
States
Sure
of
you do.
America.
If you're
The
ceding your
United
state
States of
power to
America.
choose a representative to the citizens of California, then absolutely you do.
They're American citizens. They should be represented in the federal government
They have different
fully.
interests than those in any of the other states. They've got a major fishing industry, especially Oregon and Washington has a major
Every
fishing industry. I mean, how do they benefit that a lot of the laws they create aren't going to benefit Nebraska, and they very well may hurt Nebraska.
every state has its own interests, right?
Ceding your interest to other states isn't going to be the benefit of that state.
So the people in Nebraska deserve outsized influence in our federal
No,
government. That's
they
how we get farm bills. Anyways, as far as that goes, I think we got one more topic, right?
I think that might have been it.
That's it? You don't want
I
to talk
think
about the
so.
UPS contract? You're
Oh,
tired?
we had that one, didn't we? Yeah. Yeah, we'll keep that one short. We're probably running a little over here, but yeah. So that UPS union threatened to strike and ended up signing a contract with the company that offers salary and benefits of an equivalent of about $170,000 a year. It's big money for a truck driver, I think. Keep in mind of that 170,000, I think about 50,000 of that is in benefits, so it's not quite as lopsided as you might think. It's not all salary. That said, I see that seems to me a sign that inflation is going to be pretty hard to stamp out. So if you think about $170,000 a year for a UPS driver, that's going to result in more expensive packages in a time where most of our shopping is done, from Amazon or other internet companies. Also, in order to remain competitive, UPS competitors, and by competitor, I don't just mean FedEx and USPS, I mean anybody out there who needs workers, blue collar workers, are going to have to compete by upping the amount that they pay their workers to get them from running to UPS. It's going to be pretty difficult, and it might not just be competitors if you think about it, because there's a lot of IT workers and developers and things like that that don't make that type of money. At those rates, I think you're very possibly going to. I mean, it's just a driver of inflation.
So you don't believe that blue collar workers deserve to get paid?
Oh, I'm not saying that. The company did it. They're well within their rights. I'm not criticizing anybody. I just
You don't.
it's a lot of money, right? I don't think
Do
I
we
don't think
complain about
inflation
it?
is done. I don't think inflation is done, and I think it's a great example of why you don't need a mandated minimum wage, because the market will define
Oh,
the
please.
rates.
You're talking the Teamsters Union. There are very few unions, and I think the UAW is gonna uh, you- is gonna
They're going after Ford and
yeah,
GM.
yeah,
Yeah.
in September.
Yep.
I think so. Expect a whole nother round of this. I'm there's not that many unions in this country. This is the Teamsters. Just to give a little bit more background on this 170, because I've read, once you came up, sent this to me, I didn't hear about it until I looked it up. Everything said 170,000. Put it in perspective a little bit. Most of the articles after the headline will explain that, as you did correctly, and I'm glad you did, it includes the benefits.
Yep.
It was a 5-year contract, so it's the average. At the end of this 5-year contract, they will average $170,000 in salary and benefits, like 125,050 for the benefits. It's going from 145,000 now to 170. So I didn't do the math, but let's just say 5% increase a year over 5 years. So it's important to say it's 5 years out. I consider that job very tough. I consider it a critical job. I do think blue collar jobs deserve. I mean, I sat on my butt all day. Yes, I have too much education, whatnot. Um, I you couldn't pay me enough to do the UPS job.
I think
Um,
it'd be fun, honestly. I'm not, and I just want to be clear. I'm not stating that they don't deserve it. I think they deserve what the market's going to give them and what their employer is going to give them. More power to them.
right.
All I'm saying is inflation is it's a symptom, right, of the inflation, and we're at risk of getting into a wage spiral
Right.
upward, which will make inflation go higher.
You're right. I
And
mean, there is that. that
It makes me
potential, especially
question
in a
too.
tight labor market.
What is the? Do you have any idea what the percentage of people making minimum wage today are versus making right at minimum wage today versus 2 years ago? I bet there's, relatively speaking, very few people still making only minimum wage.
Yeah, I don't think it's been that many people, simply because it's kind of a benchmark um, as far as people at exactly minimum wage. I don't think there's always been much. It just it just serves as a benchmark for kind of the as it says, a minimum wage, and wages kind of adjust from that. So I don't think historically many people have earned, but you're probably right. Um, you know, given the tightness of the job market, which isn't a job market a good thing?
Absolutely.
Okay. Um,
Yeah.
so, but
I
you're
think the
right.
Fed would like to see it loosen.
Yeah, I
And
would
I'm not
definitely.
sure the Fed really pivots until it does loosen significantly.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is indicative of uh, labor getting a little bit of an upper hand in recent years because of the tight labor market. I don't quite understand why labor markets have been so tight, given our GDP growth hasn't been through the roof. So it's a little bit of a mystery. People come up with theories that there was a lot of free money around and people were sitting on the sidelines and living off that money for a while. Things, you know, as you pointed out today, credit card debt is going up. I mean, we're seeing indications of a little bit more stress on the consumer side. I know that there was a ton of excess savings during the pandemic that
I
got
think there's a
built
lot of
up.
people working two jobs, and I
Yep,
don't
because
know
they
exactly
can.
how that plays into the numbers. But yeah, there's a lot of people working two jobs. I'm guessing maybe productivity has taken a little bit of a dip in the COVID era.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. This could lead into a wage spiral. We'll see what happens with the UAW. Um, yeah, I mean, it will contribute to inflation. But on the plus side, if Amazon has to cut off, Prime free delivery, it might save me money, since I won't see as many packages showing up on my front door, hopefully,
It's a
as I do nowadays. So
silver lining and everything,
I'm
right?
like all for the UPS man. I
Well, it
don't have
just
to
means
tip them at
Amazon is more
Christmas now.
likely to increase their delivery. I don't know if you see Amazon vans too often, but I see them like 3, 4 times a day here. Amazon around here will deliver same day often. You order it in the morning, you're going to have it by the afternoon.
No, we just get UPS up here, and people in cars doing their own delivery. We don't we don't see the Amazon trucks anymore. But um, anything else on this one?
I think we're good.
We're good. We wrapped that up quick. Well, this is our extra bonus extended version podcast.
Do we have any exit music or?
Do we have exit music? You can hum something if you want.
Oh, that would not be a good idea.
We'll remind people of where to find us on the internet at sensiblecenterpack.com, on Gmail at sensiblecenterpack@gmail.com, and on X at
USA SC PAC. It's USA SCPAC.
well. Thanks for the great topics tonight, Bob. I think we really ran them to the ground.
Yeah, enjoy this.
Yep.
Good to
All right.
chat.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Thanks.